was 94 was the first one. Well, that was right when I moved back here from Atlanta, and my dad was I moved in and started work in the January of '93, so it would have been not that year, not that November, but it would have been November of '94, so 1 year later. And he was very nervous about the PA part of it, because he knew he had this band, they call it a big band, and he had all these arrangements, all this music, but he didn't know anything about the PA thing, so I did, and so he asked me if I'd help him set up, and it was just this very simple little Shure system with a board that he plugged in the wall and 2 speakers, and a couple of mics, one for him to talk to, but the band made most of the sound. And it took about 5 minutes to set up. And we'd gone to the big white tent in the parking lot and found that, did it all. We set it. Most of it was setting up the stands, and getting the lights all connected and everything. And so he was very meticulous about that kind of thing. But this little book show, this is him right here. And he had the stands with his initials, JM, and then his stand had his signature, Jimmy Morgan, on it. And he paid for all these musicians himself. That was his donation to the Scott Memorial Foundation. And I think that's why I got to play piano, because he knew he wasn't going to pay me. And so it was one check he didn't have to write. So he didn't go out and find a great piano player, he just got me. And so I got to do that. And then also Debbie Bridges, who used to live here, she and I subbed back and forth sometime. And she was a lot of fun, because she could really read. I was more of an improviser, and she was really good at reading, but she's a good improviser too. But, and he got great musicians. A lot of them came from Raleigh. Some of the horn players played in North Carolina Symphony, and but they loved to play jazz. And then he got the best arrangements, and he curated he had all the folders for trumpet. He had 4 saxes, 3 trumpets, and a rhythm section, and the sax players, like he would substitute on clarinet sometimes, and flute, and soprano sax sometimes. And it was fun. And he had a great drummer named David Waylett, and it was real big band music. And back then, so that's 30 years ago, there were enough people still living who grew up with that music, who like some of these jazz ballads, like Memories of You, they would come up afterwards and say, "Oh man, I remember dancing to that at my prom." So that would never happen now. People like jazz for the ambiance now, but they knew that a lot of people knew those songs, and I know that we had a lot of people that would dance, And then afterwards, after 2 sets of the big band, they bring on, the other band that played beach music and pop music and stuff like that. And my dad was a little bit incredulous when they did that. He was like, why did they want that when they had us? And because to him, jazz was it, man. Jazz was the thing. And this is him. And I always think this, I don't know who took this picture, honestly, but he's got his sax right there. And this picture to me is him looking at me and going, "You ready? A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4." And then we're counting it into the song, And but he was in his element. He loved doing it. And so he was really in the jazz era. And he and his brother Morris Morgan was a great jazz piano player. And I only got to play with the band when Morris couldn't do it, because he was great. He was really, really great. And but they would out at the Lumber-Maxon Air Base, there was a club, a jazz club, in the 30s, and it was owned by African American family. And these bands like Count Basie and Duke Ellington would be going from New York to Miami, and this was about halfway. And they would get these really good bands, and for dances. And so Dad and Morris, he'd tell me these stories, I don't know if they snuck out or they actually got permission, but they would go there. And so, it's a segregated society, but in that case, this was an African American business. The white people were in the balcony, And all the black people were dancing, and they'd wave and everything, and all they wanted to do was hear the band anyway. And so they would go to that club, and they would get great bands. And so they were really crazy about it. And Dad played, in high school band. He went to Macaulay School in Chattanooga, and he played there. He went to 1 year of Davidson, and he played while he was there. And his, this is his claim to fame, okay? So his first year at Davidson was the fall of '41, and December 7th, 1941, was Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and war started. Well, the Rose Bowl was between Duke and University of Southern California, and it was going to be in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. But then they couldn't see beyond the curve of the earth, and so they weren't sure they were not going to bomb, the Rose Bowl. It was kind of like 9/11. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And so that year in December of '41, they moved the Rose Bowl from Pasadena, California, to the other school plan that was Duke. And so they had it at Wallace Wade Stadium in Durham, the Rose Bowl. And they needed, within a month, to get a band for halftime. And so all these colleges in North Carolina, they asked him to do a masked band. They set all the music up. So his band at Davidson played in that masked band at the halftime show of the Rose Bowl. And so Dad always said that his claim to fame was he played in the Rose Bowl. That was his big joke he would tell. He was very punny. He used to, I still do it with my jazz group. He made plays on the names of these songs, like Girl from Ipanema. He never said Ipanema. He always said the girl from Iwo Jima. He thought that was hilarious. And what was the other one? Hello, young lovers, get out of my car, instead of hello, young lovers, wherever you are. And then the other one was, instead of stomping with Symphony Sid, he said, undulating with ubiquitous Ulysses. He was like that. He got that one from George Shearing. George Shearing was one of his hero jazz guys, and he brought him here to play at St. Andrews, and so he picked him up there and got to be friends with him. But your question was, how he grew up playing mostly clarinet. And then when he was in World War II, he was stationed on Tinian. He was a navigator on B-29 that bombed Japan. And he was in a jazz band there that had some people in it that later became famous jazz musicians. And he got to play with them. And then the other thing was he saw the Fat Boy atomic bomb. The Enola Gay was stationed on the other side of the island, the plane that bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And they had a friend who was an MP. He said, man, you got to see this thing that we got over here. And they went over there in a Jeep, and it was surrounded by soldiers and was in this big egg-shaped thing with fins. And they did not know what it was. And he said he didn't realize what he had seen until sometime in the 60s when they declassified the pictures, and they looked, well, it was the bomb that they dropped on Hiroshima. And he saw it. It's crazy. But then he came back, and it was his mom got married in '49, and it was the '50s and the big jazz time. And he according to my mom, he played every weekend, and he was gone playing with his bands and stuff. And he always had a band, and we always had a nice piano in our house, and musicians would come over and jam, and we thought everybody lived like that. We thought that's what you did, and even when I was in high school, this is when Chicago became a big band, and so I got a bunch of my friends from Scotland High School band to come over, and I figured out the horn parts that the Chicago horn players did, and I wrote them all up. And then we were playing Beginnings and Color My World and a few of those songs. And then my dad would come in, and he would get on the piano and play this big old chord and said, all right, y'all need to play this as the final chord. And the guys would figure out what their note was and hit this big old chord. He loved doing that kind of stuff. Yeah. So it was a big part of his life. And honestly, he played his entire life. I mean, I remember when in his last year when he had cancer, helped him kind of move into the hospital, and he had a boom box, and he was listening to Ella Fitzgerald, and that was his comfort zone. You know, that's what made him feel comfortable. His tenor sax, and that was, you know, Selmer. It's a Selmer Paris, and it's a great instrument. And there we go like that. And he had a great time with it. And there's nobody else in my family that plays reed instruments anymore.